Legendary swords that actually exist. The Seven-Branched Sword. This unusual sword was found in Japan's Isano-kami Shrine in 1945. It was unlike any other sword. It had 6 protrusions branching out from its side, and the tip is considered its 7th. The sword was in poor condition. There was a faded inscription along the blade, and the exact translation of it has been questioned many times. This unusual sword was a gift from a Korean king to a Japanese monarch. The Sword of Gujian. It is believed that his sword belonged to King Gujian, who ruled the Chinese state of Yue thousands of years ago. The sword was unearthed by archaeologists in the year 1965. The most surprising part was that the sword was in perfect condition. Even though it was more than 2,000 years old, there wasn't a spot of rust on it. Another interesting thing about it was the craftsmanship of the etchings. It was unbelievably detailed for a sword forged so long ago. The Sword of Mercy. Also known as Kirtana, the Sword of Mercy is a ceremonial sword used at the coronation of British kings and queens and one of the crown jewels of the United Kingdom. It is interesting to note that the end of this sword is blunt and squared to symbolize mercy. This sword is legendary because it is linked with Tristan, a knight who sat at King Arthur's Round Table. Some also believe that the Sword of Mercy was the sword of King Edward I. The Sword of St. Peter. Preserved in the Poznan Archdiocesan Museum, the Sword of St. Peter is a holy relic. An interesting fact about this sword: it is said that this is the sword with which the Apostle Peter cut off the right ear of the high priest's servant at the time of Jesus' arrest in Gethsemane. Talking about its design, the sword is wide-tipped and is similar in shape to a dussack or machete. Jouaouz. It is said that Jouaouz was the favorite sword of the French king Charlemagne. This sword won many battles for the king and became one of the most important relics of French history. Since then, the sword has been announced as a historical treasure of France. It was used in French royal coronation ceremonies since the 13th century and now resides in the Louvre Museum in Paris. The Wallace Sword. Allegedly, the Wallace sword belonged to William Wallace. He was a Scottish knight, a leader of the Scottish resistance against the English army and one of the most revered Scottish legends. The antique two-handed sword is said to have been used by William Wallace at the Battle of Stirling in 1297 and the Battle of Falkirk in 1298. The legendary sword now resides in a glass casing at the National Wallace Monument Museum in Stirling, Scotland. The Sword of Osman. An important sword of state, the Sword of Osman, was used during the enthronement ceremony of the sultans of the Ottoman Empire. It is interesting to note that this distinct type of enthronement ceremony was the Ottoman variant of the bay'a. The legendary sword was named after the founder of the Ottoman Empire, Osman I. Currently, the sword is held in the Imperial Treasury section of Topkapı Palace. Shuguri no Ontachi. The sword is only taken out when a new emperor ascends the throne, and a feather from a crested ibis is also used during this ceremony. This sword is used for religious services, and that is why it is much more gorgeous than swords used for actual fighting. The exterior of the sword is adorned with multiple bells, fine gold sculptures, agate and amber, crystal, glass and 2 crested ibis feathers. The Zulfikar Scimitar. You probably don't know this, but the battle between Romans and Ottomans was known as the Battle of the Straight Swords against the curved swords. Ottomans preferred curved swords, also known as scimitars. They considered it the best sword for beheading the enemy. The current location of this sword is kept a secret.